down is super exciting. And I hope y'all are as excited about it as I am, because I get to see it. I get to see it in Fort Smith. I get to see it in Texas and all these different places. And Brother Jesse, thank you for what you're doing. You know, I've said before, what we need to do is quit worrying about waking up all the sheep. We need to start waking up all the lions and start hearing the lions roar. Well, these lions are your pastors. The pastors are starting to wake up and they're starting to roar. And the sheep are saying, I'm going to follow him or her. And we're getting out there and the army's being built. And all these forces are coalescing together, because we need today more than any time in our lifetime is we need more Elijahs. We need someone to stand on Mount Carmel and start saying, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight if I have to stand here by myself, and I'm going to trust in the one and only true King, the living God. I'm trusting in Him and all of His power. That's what we need to do. We need Elijahs. We need Davids. We need Paul Reveres. We need modern day Paul Reveres. Someone to say, the British are coming. The British are coming. The communists and the jihadis, they're coming. And we need others. We need all of you to wake up and say, all right, I'm grabbing my stuff. We're getting our full armor of God, and we're getting out on the battlefield, and we're going to take this fight on in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Y'all obviously aren't as excited about this as I am. I'm excited. Someone said, anyways, I won't even go into it, but it's not easy being on an island by yourself. It's downtrodden. I mean, anyway, someone said, how do you do it? I said, the grace of the Lord. But I'm excited. How could you be excited about getting punched in the face? I said, I'm excited because I've been called for such a time as this. And each and every one of you have as well. And I get the honor and pleasure this morning of introducing my friend, a fellow patriot, rabid Christian, a man that has stood on the wall for 19 to 20 years, all by himself, just like Elijah did on Mount Carmel, and said, yep, we can settle this today. He said that for 20 years, and nobody would come to help him. As a matter of fact, they continue to pile up and attack him. But he stood his ground. And today, it's all culminating into what we're seeing. God's army's rising. We're coming together, and we're going to take the fight to the enemy. We're going to put feet to our faith. We're going to get out there, and we're going to win this war. John Guandolo, known him for a long time. He loves his country. He loves God. He loves his family. Each and every one of you considers your family. He's a graduate of the Naval Academy. He's a United States Marine. That's probably enough in itself. He's a warrior like David. He joined the Marine Corps as a combat veteran. He resigned his commission out of the Marine Corps. He's in Special Operations Units. Went into the FBI. Before the FBI got their heads stuck so far up their tail ends they couldn't breathe. If the NSA's listen, I'm John Bennett and I approve that message. But he went into the FBI, into some special operations there. He dealt with the threats that he's going to talk about today. He moved out of the FBI, was recruited out of the FBI to go into a irregular warfare unit inside the DOD. And then after that, during the Obama administration, him, like many, many other patriots, were pushed out. So he started his own company, national security company, called Understanding the Threat. And he's been in the war and in this fight for many, many years. And he's done it because of his love for you, God, and our country. So it's an honor to introduce my friend, fellow Marine and patriot, John Guandolo.
Appreciate it. It is a great honor to be here. And if you will indulge me, and I suspect this crowd will you join me in prayer? So, Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering us here today. I just pray that you will bring your blessing and protection over this crowd, over all of us. And I pray that you will guide me and only allow me to speak truth here and open the hearts, ears, and minds of everybody here. In Jesus' name, amen. So thank you. So I'm really grateful, Jesse, for having me here. Jesse told me I needed to keep it under 4 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That was a joke, okay? So in the time I do have, I want to, there's a lot I want to share, but here's what I would like to do simply this morning. I want to give you a little snapshot of where we're supposed to be, what's going on, and how the other side has been doing what they're doing. And then share with you understanding the understanding the threat's role in the victory. Because what we do, put very simply, is we empower you, citizens, to identify what's going on in your local community and to dismantle those hostile threats. It's that simple. And you're only limited by your own creativity. So that's the good news. So let's begin real quick. And I want to ask, if I may, could everybody stand, please, with me and say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hoorah. Amen. So I want to, some of you, probably a lot of you, have no idea who I am or understanding the threat is. So I like to just begin with this for a little bona fides. And this is a letter I asked some folks to write a few years ago to support us. So when I was with a group of people that had no idea who I am or who what we are doing, but they certainly know at least one or two of these people, that might be helpful. And the letter is signed by these gentlemen. General Boykin, maybe some of you know, as a founding member of Delta Force, commanded it, has been a very outspoken leader in this country on matters that matter. And he left the government as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and ran the CIA Special Activities Division and has done a lot. And he's been in combat in numerous places, as many of you that know him are aware. Joe Schmitz, the former Inspector General of the Department of Defense, General Soyster, the former Director of Defense Intelligence Agency, and the former CIA Director, Jim Woolsey. And I just want to draw your attention to this. This is part of the letter. While all four of us were in senior positions in the U.S. intelligence community and should have been aware of this information, we were not. We first heard this critical information from the primary presenter, which was me. The information is of utmost importance to the security of the United States, is critical to formulating national security strategies, and vitally important to local and state law enforcement and intelligence professionals. So the question is, how is it that men like these and many others that I've met along the way didn't know this information that we were briefing about the threat, how they operated, and what they were actually doing? And I was sharing yesterday with Bob Lynn the story of being at a rubber chicken dinner, is what we call them in the Marine Corps, you know, where you got to wear like a fancy tuxedo and go to a nice dinner. And the Commandant of the Marine Corps was there, and this is back in 2011, I believe. And to get to the point, we were chatting, and I said, "Sir, are you aware that Al-Qaeda has never misquoted Islamic law in anything they've done?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, if that's true, then it totally changes the way we're fighting this entire war." I said, "That's right, and that's why we're losing. It's because our military is crushing them in battles on the ground, but we're losing the war because the leadership in the military is clueless, and in the civilian government, because you haven't taken the time at that point in 10 years since 9/11 to actually name who the enemy is. It's 2021. We've now 4 administrations, right? George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, now Joe Biden is in the White House. And not once has anybody since 9/11 in any official document identified the enemy. You can't win a war like that. You have to actually identify the enemy. So I want to throw this on the table for you. This case was just adjudicated, sentenced Paul Hodgkins, a citizen who was inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. And the government proffered that he didn't do anything violent. He didn't advocate any violence, and they have no evidence he wanted to ever do violence. And I'm not going to plead for either side of his case. That's not what I want to make a point here, because there are big, dangerous things going on. So I want you to see the court's record of what the special prosecutor said before the judge when they were getting ready, the judge was getting ready to sentence Mr. Hodgkins. Now, what's interesting is he pled, and what he basically pled to was obstructing the business of Congress by being in the room where they should have been. Okay, that's what he ended up. But the prosecutor admitted, Mr. Hodgkins himself is not under the legal definition of a domestic terrorist, which means the elements of the law of what a domestic terrorist is, he does not meet any of them. However, Your Honor, we want you to sentence him as a domestic terrorist. This is the kind of stuff that China does, where the law doesn't matter. And here's my point, and this is my point to people on any side of the political aisle. When you allow someone to do this, you allow everyone to do this. And if you're wondering, how come in Europe people are in jail and have been arrested for putting out social media posts, literally, or writing things in books that people don't like? This is Gestapo, Stalinist ideology. This is totalitarian. This is tyrannical. And we cannot call it something lesser than it is. This is pure totalitarianism. And it's not coming to America. It's in the system operating. And so what I hope to share with you today is, how did we get here? So in the time I in the time I have, you guys ran out of coffee, so my throat's a little. I want to walk you through some things, but if you will indulge me for a few minutes, I want to give you a snapshot of where we're supposed to be. Now, I know I'm in a room of men and women who, at least my understanding is, at least a large portion are Christians and patriots. And so I think you're going to hear things that you didn't know. And if you do, that's okay, because most crowds I go to and share a couple of these things, 98% of the people have never heard it. And the question I want you to be thinking in your mind is, I know most of you realize, holy cow, how did we get here? But I want to remind you how far away we are from where the founders envisioned in the 1770s and 80s. Because we are much farther away than most of us actually can grasp. Because this is the 2021, and we are very far away from that. So let me begin by talking about that for a second. The founders were students of philosophy and religion and history and world governments. But they had one singular belief that rooted them together, and that is the creator of the universe gave every human being on the planet unalienable rights that we possess, that we can't even give away if we want to, because it's in us. And they built a legal system and a government around that simple truth. That's it. That's America in a nutshell. In order to have a constitutional republic, we are not a democracy. We are not a democracy. We are not a democracy. So somebody please tell, George Bush and Joe Biden and other people, America is not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic where majority rules but minority rights are respected. And the only way minority rights can be respected is if you know what those rights are, and therefore there has to be a moral standard. And guess what? There is. So when we look at the primary form of government in the world for human history up until America, it was primarily monarchy, right? Czars and emperors and kings. And if you had a good king, there was justice in the land. And if you didn't, there wasn't. Well, the founders realized, how do we make the president not three equal branches of government, by the way, the lie that's taught in most school books today, three separate branches, not equal. Executive is the supreme of the three, the way the founders intended. But we have to put checks and balances on this guy in case he sways. That's how it's built, for those maybe not aware of that. So the ideal is the Declaration. And you cannot look at the Constitution except through the lens of the Declaration. And the Declaration in the first sentence identifies the foundation of our law and government. The moral standard for the constitutional republic, the law of nature, and the law of nature is God, legally defined in Blackstone's commentaries, the law used by the founders as the will of God as he reveals himself in creation, and Holy Scripture. That's it. That's the moral standard. How many of you knew that? Okay, that's good. That's a third. Really, is that all? A third? Okay. Well, we're not done. So if that's the case, and the entire legal and governmental system is based on the idea that we're all created equal with unalienable rights, and that the law of nature and nature's God is the foundation upon which our government is built, then maybe this makes sense. That John Jay, one of the greatest founding fathers, the guy who was one of the three authors of the Federalist Papers, the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, said that it's the responsibility, the duty of Americans to elect Christians to public office. Now, why would he say that? Because the entire system is based on the understanding, as Jefferson said, on the moral precepts of Jesus. That's it. So how can you have somebody that doesn't believe that legislating laws, enforcing laws, or judicially making decisions about those laws if they don't even believe in the very basis upon which the law was made? Well, I'll take it a step further. Some of you may not know this, that at the time of the founding, at the time of the ratification of the Constitution and the first 10 amendments, every state in America, in their state constitution, had a requirement for a public profession of Christianity to hold public office. Raise your hand if you knew that, please. Yeah, what do we have, a dozen? Raise them up, just so I can see. Okay, so maybe 2 dozen. And all of us would say we're patriots and Christians, right? Don't you think we should have known that? I didn't know that 14 years ago. I learned that as an adult from people smarter than me. And of course, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, okay, missed that one in the 7th grade civics class because it was never taught. So here's one example. Delaware, in their state constitution, tells you, you have to say, I profess faith in God the Father, Jesus Christ, his only Son, and in the Holy Ghost, one God, blessed forevermore. And I do acknowledge the Holy Scripture of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration. You had to publicly profess that to hold public office. And in 1853, these citizens, representing hundreds of others, petitioned the Congress to abolish the office of chaplain everywhere exists in the federal government. And the White House, the Navy, the Congress, the Senate, and the House. Did you know that? Yeah. And then the Congress did an investigation, and they went back into the founding era and said, well, what was the intent of the founders? And then they published a report in March of 1854. You probably can't see it right here. March 27, 1854. Right? The 33rd Congress had the people during the revolution had a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. Here's the kicker. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged, not any one sect. When the founders used the word religion in this context, they're talking about Christianity. And this is what I mean. Any attempt to level and discard all religion would have been viewed with universal indignation. This is the Judiciary Committee of the U.S. Congress. The object was not to substitute Judaism or Mohammedanism, Islam, or infidelity, but to prevent rivalry among sects to the exclusion of others. How about that? That's a little different. Try to, if you said this today, imagine being on CNN and saying you need to profess Christianity to hold public office. They'd have a conniption so badly their heads would explode. So let's review. The law of nature, nature's God. The will of God as he reveals himself in creation. For instance, when people say, John, you have a Second Amendment right to carry a weapon, I'm like, no, I do not. I don't have any rights. The Second Amendment doesn't give me any rights. I have an unalienable right to carry a weapon because I have an unalienable right in nature. I don't even need to open the Bible. The Bible tells me I have a right to defend myself, but I don't need it. Nature tells me. Do bears and dogs and wolves defend themselves? You're done. That's God's creation. And we look at what God's creation does, and that gives us examples. And when those examples don't answer the question, then we go to Holy Scripture. That's how it works. So constitutional scholars have said you have the unalienable right to defend yourself and therefore bear the tools to do so. That's it. We don't need an America. We don't need a constitution to tell us that. It exists in nature. That's it. So we don't have a First Amendment right to speak freely. That's an unalienable right to move and operate so long as my actions don't impede or intrude on your freedoms that God gave you. That's it. It's so simple. It's not complicated. So when you do that, then we create a government, and we, people, agree to let others rule over us so long as they rule justly according to the law of nature and nature's God. That's the social compact. And when they don't rule justly, we remove the social compact. That's called the inherent right of revolution in the Constitution. We take the power away because we, the people, are the government. So then we create a government that can make civil law. Like how do businesses run in Oklahoma? What's the width of the sidewalk? What's the speed limit in your neighborhood? They can do those kinds of things so long as it never violates that. And if it does, they remove the social compact. Not for light and transient reasons, for serious breaches of our liberty. And when you do that, you get this in your society, liberty. And when you have liberty, you get creativity and imagination and ingenuity, and you create things like cars and planes and a light bulb and a radio and a TV and the microchip in America. That's what you get. The most generous and prosperous nation in the history of the world. And why are we the most generous? Because we're good, because we read the Bible in school and teach it until 1965. So from the 1600s to 1965, we had a guide on how to maintain, as Adams and Jefferson and Washington said, because they instituted what was already there. the Bible was already in schools and governments weren't responsible for the schools. That would be abhorrent to them. So now, when we know this and we look at what's going on, now it makes the threats much more clear. See, it's no longer two gray posters next to each other. One's America, we really don't know what we are. One's the bad guys, they're not really bad, they just have a different perspective. No, when you know who we are and you take the gray to white, and you know who they are and you take the gray to black, there's that contrast. That's why they don't want you teaching this in schools, because they don't want the contrast. They can't take over if the contrast is there. So, the communist movement and the Islamic movement. Let's do a quick little brief review. Now, I encourage you, Phil and Pam Brown are in the back at the table, and they have plenty of materials, books, DVDs. You can go to our website. We have a ton of free stuff, free resources at understandingthethreat.com. And I encourage you to go there and use them. I encourage you to get the resources and do a deeper dive, because you've got to understand this threat and how they operate. And it doesn't matter whether you're a pastor or your passion is education or voter fraud or the COVID nonsense or any of this. Whatever your thing is, what we do is we empower you with tools to be able to see this, because this is in all of it. Now, there are other movements, obviously. There's the secular humanist movement and the Satanist movement, all this stuff. There's all kinds of stuff. But these are the two most powerful and readily identifiable movements in the United States. Individually, each one could bring us down, and they are. The problem is they're working very enmeshed with each other at the local, state, national, and international level. And that's where the real trouble comes. So let's first talk about communism and what they're doing here. Well, they've been here 100 years. So let me just say this. What you're experiencing right now and what you're seeing in real time is the culmination of a 100-year communist movement in the United States and a 60-year Islamic movement in the United States coming together and blossoming right now. Over the last several years, but really right now. So you shouldn't shake your head and say, why are they sentencing people to jail? Why are they arresting people for basically expressing their free rights? Or don't ask logical questions. You need to understand that is all the intentional outcome of what these guys have been doing for 100 years. Now, this is from 1922, and this guy right here on the far left sitting down, Alexander Trachtenberg, says, we will take the United States, but we're not going to take it by telling you we're communists. We're going to take it under labels like liberalism, progressivism, democracy, but take it we will. That was 100 years ago. And they have a doctrine, a strategy, lines of operation, and for 100 years, minus what we did against the Soviet Union, primarily under President Ronald Reagan, apart from that, we have never addressed the problem in its totality. And so it's blossomed in the United States. When we talk about Antifa, this bottom photo you can see on the screen, if you can see it, is from Germany in 1932, where Antifa was established under the orders of Comintern, the International Communist Party of Moscow. And they've got the Communist Party flag. So when you hear anti-fascist, what you should hear is communist. They're communists. Antifa, they're communists. And they began in the United States as the American League Against War and Fascism, patterned after Antifa in Germany. And a guy who was in the Communist Party USA, Manning Johnson, who ran for Congress, defected from Communist Party USA, wrote a book, and testified that the purpose of that American League Against War and Fascism was always to subvert and overthrow the government. They are who you think they are. And we have all the evidence we need. Black Lives Matter was born out of the largest Chinese-backed communist organization in America. They were always communists. If somebody gives you this load of crap that they were taken over by communists or they're being influenced by communists, that's a lie. It was communist from start to finish. The three ladies that initiated it are communists, and they admit it. So indulge me for a few minutes as we do this 3-minute video that I think you'll find interesting, that ties Black Lives Matter directly to Chinese Communist Party here in the United States.
BLM leaders are closely tied to the Chinese Communist Party. The main connection is through Asians for Black Lives, which is controlled by the San Francisco-based Chinese Progressive Association, or CPA.
I've been honored and humbled to throw down with folks over the last 7 to 8 months in the name of Black Lives Matter. And I've been really humbled by our co-conspirators, Asians for Black Lives.
The CPA is the Communist Party of China's main West Coast support group. Pam Ta Lee is an Asian for Black Lives member and a CPA leader.
I'm the chairperson and a founder of the Chinese Progressive Association, that our roots start back in the 1930s. And they came out of around the Depression, and they were socialists, they were communists.
Alex Tom is a founder of Asians for Black Lives and a former chief executive officer of the CPA.
There is a part of the left that has always been really curious and lifting up the role of China.
In 2013, Alex Tom led a delegation of American radicals to communist China.
We started to be able to have access to coming into China. So we built relationships with people in the party, activists underground, and also NGOs.
In 2016, Alex Tom and CPA official Lucia Lin produced a 300-page revolutionary manual for Asians for Black Lives and BLM activists. Alex Tom has known BLM co-founder Alicia Garza since their student activist days at UC San Diego in the late 1990s.
Actually, I think it was my friend Alicia Garza.
Alex Tom helped Garza and fellow BLM founder Patrice Coolers form ties with the Southeast Asian Freedom Network, a coalition of Laotian, Cambodian, and Vietnamese radicals. Alex Tom, Alicia Garza, Lucia Lin, and Pam Ta Lee are all members of Left Roots, a front for the pro-communist China organization Liberation Road. In 2014, after traveling to communist China with Alex Tom, Lucia Lin visited Ferguson, Missouri, with her BLM comrade, Alicia Garza. Lin and Garza met with Liberation Road communist Jamala Rogers' Organization for Black Struggle, the Liberation Road front group that organized the Ferguson riots. CPA funds Alicia Garza's far-left voter mobilization organization, Black Futures Lab.
China has had a very important role in funding left experiments.
Alex Tom is also very close to Chinese communist officials in San Francisco.
And we have a relationship with the Chinese embassy. Like, we actually have I've had to have various conversations with them about our positioning.
Pam Ta Lee and Alex Tom both work closely with former CPA Chief Executive Officer Eric Marr, a longtime supporter of Communist China and Asians for Black Lives. Eric Marr is also a close ally of veteran Bay Area activist Russell Lowe, who was a former office manager for Senator Dianne Feinstein, and an identified Chinese Communist Party spy.
If this country doesn't give us what we want, then we will burn down this system and replace it.
I think I have a pastor that's going to be buying me some beer. So I do have a rule I should have told you at the beginning. If your phone goes off during my presentation, you owe me a 6-pack of beer. And if there are any Baptists in the room, you don't get a pass. You got to get a friend to buy it for you. And if you're offended by that, I want you to know I don't care. So, because if we can't have a sense of humor at this point in our existence, I don't know when we can. No, but really, I'm serious. Okay. So here's the point. Do you understand? The Communist Party in the United States were the ones who burned down Ferguson. Did you take that out of that? And just as a sidebar, 100% of the nuclear protests just in the United States during the 80s were funded by who? Communists. All of them. Listen, 5,000 people, 3,000 people don't show up with pre-printed signs out of nowhere. I've had people that are paid protesters come protest my event, so we're well aware of their ability to organize. And it's pretty interesting because right at the end of the hour, they're gone. Like they're on a time clock almost, because they are. So what you need, what I encourage you to understand is what you're experiencing right now is very intentional and very well coordinated. It is not a bunch of random happenstance. The other side, both on the communist and the Islamic side, are very well organized. And I'll talk a little more about that. Now, that film was made by a friend of ours, Trevor Loudon. If you don't know Trevor, he's a great resource, even though he talks funny because he's from New Zealand. And we tell him that, just so you know, you can call him and say, John Guandolo said you talk funny. He's be like, I know. But great resource, trevorloudon.com. And I encourage you to use it. Now, Trevor did several reports on the most easily identifiable Marxists and communists in the U.S. Congress. And the latest report, I think he has over almost 6 dozen members of Congress. And guess what party they all belong to? Yeah. Now, the problems aren't limited. The leadership of the Republican Party at the federal level is disastrous. They are as bad as the Democrat side. The elites on both sides of the political aisle are selling us down the river. It's horrible. It's horrible at that level. However, we're talking about this right now, and so he's got a list. I know you can't read it, so there's the current list, but I'll just give you a couple. I thought it was interesting that when John Lewis died, the Communist Party USA said rest in peace. Isn't that interesting? In my world that I come from, that's called an investigative clue, right? Here's this guy, this congressman from the 3rd District in Arizona. He admitted, I'm a Saul Alinsky guy. That's where I learned this stuff. Has anybody heard of Saul Alinsky? Rules for Radicals? That's good. It's a book about Marxist revolutionary ideology, and it's dedicated to who? The book is dedicated to Satan. That's also called an investigative clue that the people you're dealing with are not good people, generally. So let's go the other route. Let's talk about Islamic law. This is a book of Islamic law. Allah's divine law. Well, let's first, whether it's the Islamic movements, the suit-wearing jihadis, like Muslim Brotherhood or other large movements like that, or whether we're talking about the military jihadi organizations like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State and Hamas and Hezbollah and Boko Haram and Abu Sayyaf and Al-Shabaab or whoever, they all say we want Sharia, Allah's divine law imposed on every human on earth, which is exactly what the OIC says. Raise your hand if you know what the OIC is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyone else? John Bennett, you don't count. Or you count. John, you do count, okay? But you know what I mean. How many of you know what the UN is? Raise your hand. Yeah, right, everybody, right? The United Nations. The OIC is the largest voting bloc in the UN. It's made up of every Muslim nation at the head of state level. 57 members in the OIC. And they say, we are the voice of the Muslim world. Every 3 years, the head of every Muslim nation comes together and they make decisions that are enforceable upon the Muslim community globally. Now, see, when we hear that we don't even understand that. We can't imagine if like NATO, right, and Germany says, America, you have to do this, or all the NATO heads make a decision and they come back and Americans say, okay, you all got to do this. Americans would be like, yeah, whatever. We're not doing that. Not so in the Muslim world. So it's hard to comprehend this. But the OIC in 1990 at the head of state level, the heads of state of every Muslim nation approved the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, and in 1993 they served it as an official document. Pay attention here. This is important. The document defines human rights as viewed by the entire Muslim world. And they say life can only be taken away from a human being only for a Sharia prescribed reason. And the very last article says Islamic Sharia is the only source of reference for human rights. Which means when a Muslim leader says human rights, they mean what? And they lawfully mean that because they've served it to the UN 30 years ago and told you and told the State Department and the White House and the DOD, this is how we view human rights. Which means, because it is lawful in 100% of Sharia, that if you are a non-Muslim, you must convert to Islam or be killed. Unless you are a Jew, Christian, or Zoroastrian, and then you must convert to Islam or submit to Islam, pay the non-Muslim poll tax, or be killed. That's it. That is human rights for them. If you are a homosexual, you must be advised you need to square yourself away or we kill you. If you leave Islam, according to the elements of the law, which doesn't mean you just say I'm no longer Muslim. There are a lot of things in there that mean legally you leave Islam, and that's a capital crime. You're killed. If you commit adultery, man or woman, you are stoned to death. That's Islam. The purpose of Islam is to impose Allah's divine law on every human being through all means necessary. That's it. That's why they teach it to first graders right here in Tulsa in Islamic schools. In case you didn't know that. It's why they teach it in Islamic elementary and junior high schools in Dallas, where I'm from, in Miami, in Kansas City, in Toronto, in Berlin, in Rome, in Cairo, in Amman, Jordan, in Nigeria, because that's what it is. The question you should ask, well, let me just share this. This is from the most widely used book for 7th graders, 11, 12-year-olds in U.S. Islamic schools. The basis for the legal and political system is a Sharia of Allah. The law of the land is a Sharia of Allah. And it says in this book that the duty of Muslim citizens is to be loyal to the Islamic State. And it also says that if anyone dies in jihad, they automatically go to paradise. Now, this is taught to 12 and 11-year-olds here in Oklahoma and Dallas and all over the country and in Europe, North America, Asia, Africa. Why wouldn't it be? My question is when people say, well, how do they get radicalized? And I literally say, I don't know what you mean. Radicalized. How is it radical? It's not fundamental either. That's our term. Don't put a Christian term on Islam. Use their language. This is normative and universally taught. There is no Islamic school in the world that doesn't teach this because this is what it is. And it's a capital crime in Islam for Muslims to teach other Muslims anything about Islam that's not Islam. But they can lie to you. It is permissible to lie if the goal is permissible, and obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory. It is obligatory for them to impose Sharia on everybody on earth. So here's the way you stick it in the face of your cowardly leaders. Hey, sir, ma'am, I have a question. Why is it that in Tulsa Islamic schools, they're teaching to Muslim children what Al-Qaeda says are the requirements of Islam, but Muslim leaders are telling you the exact opposite? So somebody's being lied to. So are they lying to their children or are they lying to you? Can you tell me which one you think it is? That's an easy one. So use our resources. We'll show you how to do that. But that's an easy one. That's the question you have to ask. And if you're sitting there in this room and you're like, well, that's not quite right. I mean, my friend so-and-so is a Muslim and they don't believe that. That's great. I don't know your friend, don't care. And your friend saying my personal belief is that we should love our neighbor. That's great, but that's not Islam. And if they go and stand before an imam, they'll be executed. Maybe not in Oklahoma because they're not there yet, but they will be totally ostracized until the point they can be killed, or they may be killed. But the law requires them to be killed. That's what you need to understand. There's no other version of Islam. There might be people that apply it in different ways, or they're hot and cold on it and do part of it because they're humans. And also because Sharia is totally antithetical to human nature. So they're always going to be in history. There are times when it waxes and wanes. But when you're in a part of history where people are enforcing it in the Muslim community, like now, Muslims get killed in large numbers because they're like, well, I'm not following that. Well, that's fine. Here are your choices. But to say that's not Islam is to be wrong. Flat out wrong. And you can't prove me wrong on that. By the way, we have an offer. If what I just said you can prove is factually wrong in Islam, I'll stop teaching it and give you $1,000. So if you'd like $1,000, got it right here in my pocket. You let me know, and we'll do that. You show me where authoritative Islamic law or something that is being used in an Islamic school teaches a different version of Islam. Doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. The thing that should shock you is we still have senators and presidents and national security advisors and governors and mayors and police chiefs and sheriffs and pastors who say that's not what Islam, true Islam is just like Christianity, just like a one-off. That's a lie from the pit of hell, and you should know that. So, you're going to get the quickest brief on... Oh, sorry, I thought I smelled a six-pack. I thought I heard a six-pack over there. The largest terrorism financing trial ever successfully prosecuted in American history was in Dallas, Texas, Northern District of Texas. They were indicted. The Holy Land Foundation for Relief and Development was indicted in 2001. The case was adjudicated in November 2008, and the evidence was massive. It was a massive, 10-year investigation by the FBI, and it spanned several countries. And what the evidence demonstrated is that all of the prominent Islamic organizations in America are hostile and part of an organized effort to bring the country down. In short, that's what the evidence demonstrated. That wasn't the focus of the case. The focus of the case was that the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood created the U.S. Palestine Committee, which was Hamas, and they created 4 organizations, one of which exists in this state, the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE. That is a Hamas organization. But I figured the best way to share this with you is 5 years ago, this out-of-control, wild, rabid state legislator named John Bennett asked me to come testify, and I did, and this is what transpired. So today what I'd like to do is offer a brief overview of the threat nationally and then discuss specific threats here in Oklahoma. In the HLF trial, the Department of Justice entered into evidence Muslim Brotherhood documents which identify the Islamic Society of North America as the nucleus of their movement here. ISNA's bank records reveal ISNA directly funded Hamas and its leaders in violation of federal law, and this is why the U.S. government identifies ISNA as a member of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and an unindicted co-conspirator in that case. The HLF evidence also identifies the North American Islamic Trust, or NATE. It operates as a trust for the Muslim Brotherhood and owns many Muslim Brotherhood properties in the United States. NATE's bank records reveal NATE directly funds Hamas and its leaders overseas, and that is why the U.S. government identifies NATE as a member of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and an unindicted co-conspirator in the U.S. versus the Holy Land Foundation case. A declassified FBI document from the Bureau's Indianapolis field office, dated December 15, 1987, states in part, the leadership of NATE, MSA, and other Muslim groups are interrelated, with many leaders and members of NATE having been identified as supporters of the Islamic Revolution as advocated by the government of Iran. This information has direct relevance to this committee and to this state, since the two of the most influential Islamic organizations in Oklahoma, the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City and the Grand Mosque of Oklahoma, also known as the American Muslim Association, are owned by Nate. I would also note that just in Oklahoma County alone, there are 8 properties owned by the Muslim Brotherhood's bank, Nate. The most aggressive jihadi organization in Oklahoma is without a doubt Hamas, doing business as CARE.
Mr. Guandolo, the director of CARE Oklahoma is here with us today. Would you consider Adam Sultani a member of Hamas?
Of course. He wouldn't be leading Hamas, doing business as CARE, if he weren't. And Hamas is a terrorist organization, which means there in the room sits a terrorist. As you might imagine, he went out of the committee room and cried to the media about how nasty I am and all that stuff. But I couldn't care less, because he's a turd and he needs to be in jail. And can I say turd in this? Maybe? No? Yes? Okay, I'm getting nods. Jesse's not answering because he's like, I'm not sure I should answer that question. So he left it to you all. He's smart. This is a very savvy man there. It's good. I like to see that. So, sorry, you get what you get. You guys asked me here, you know what I mean? So now we talked about, and again, we could spend a lot more time. There's a lot more to do, but this is a very compacted, I want to give you enough so you know the problem is real. So that's, these places are in our communities, but how bad is it? Well, this guy, Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, I like starting with him. He was the most prominent Muslim in North America in the 1990s and early 2000s. And he was the leader, founder of almost 24 of the largest Islamic organizations. He worked with the State Department. He worked with the Department of Education. And he was the Islamic advisor to President Clinton and Vice President Gore. He was in the White House more than any other Muslim in America. Be careful. Be careful how you start, talking about Bill Clinton, because both sides of the aisle, remember. Both sides have stepped in it pretty good. So, Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, I'll just let you see this quick clip. Here's him outside the White House in 1999.
A year later, al-Amoudi whipped a Muslim crowd up into a frenzy at a Washington, D.C. rally, just steps from the White House. This video was taken by Emerson's group after the mainstream media had left for the day.
Anybody is a supporter of Hamas here? Hear that, Bill Clinton? We are all supporters of Hamas. Allahu Akbar. I'm also a supporter of Hezbollah. Anybody supports Hezbollah here?
We gave the video to a reporter, and the reporter called him up, and he first denied actually being at the rally. And then when the reporter said, I have this tape, he told the reporter, but you better check your Arabic. And then the reporter said, but you said it in English. Then he hung up the phone.
I call that an investigative clue also. Maybe something is awry. So we look at this picture, and I heard the groans in the crowd, but I always say be careful, because the problem is thanks to Karl Rove, al-Amoudi was brought into the Bush camp to help. Because, do you know why this is problematic? Because Abdurrahman al-Amoudi is in prison because he's Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, the leading financier for Al-Qaeda, right there. The bagman in America for Al-Qaeda. And he's in jail. And he passed Secret Service and FBI screening, vetting, as we're told. So we have some problems. Also, I love to show this guy, Vahid Majidi, who ran the FBI's Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate, and he's an Iranian-born Muslim. Now, I bet you, if I polled this audience, how many of you think that's a good idea? Raise your hand. Let me just do it this way. No, go ahead. Raise them up. So it's only 0? Okay. Now, you all aren't necessarily running these kinds of programs, but yet you realize maybe that's not a good idea. And here's all I'm saying. He might be a fine person, Might be. But since we couldn't figure out that an Al-Qaeda guy was working with the president, the Department of Education, the Secretary, the State Department, maybe an Iranian-born Muslim's not the best choice for running our weapons of mass destruction directorate. Make sense? Since we can't tell friend from foe. Okay, now here's the problem. They're all working together. At the local, state, national, and international level, they're working together. Last summer, August, some of you may know this, China, Communist China, entered into a strategic partnership with Iran. That should be a massive red star cluster going up to alert you we have big problems internationally. At the national level, you have the leader of Hamas, Nihad Awad, saying this.
But you will see in the next few minutes that you are powerful. You can make a whole difference in 2016. This is the time for us as American Muslims to be in the front, not to retreat, because all of you are leaders. Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign.
So, the leader of U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, and those of you who don't know, Hamas is an inherent part of the Brotherhood, saying they're part of our campaign. And then down to the ground level, remember Ferguson, communists, well, what is Antifa? What is Black Lives Matter? Those are communist organizations riding around the country, right? And here's justice for Floyd, a poor innocent angel brutally killed by police. That's the narrative. And police brutality is systemic. America's systemically racism. Climate change is going to kill us in the next 3 years. Right? Oh, whoa, wrong. We've got some radicals in here. So these are the narratives. Point that you have to understand. The issue is not the issue. The issue is never the issue. They don't care about climate change. They don't care about police brutality. They don't care about systemic racism. They don't care about economic injustice. If you believe they do, you do not understand this war. What they care about is control of the state and power. They care about what they say they care about, what their doctrine says. They care about overthrowing the government. That's what they care about. And that's all they care about, is about control of state and power. And yes, we are well aware at understanding the threat that not everybody involved in the movement is a card-carrying member of the Communist Party or a hardcore jihadist. Does it matter that if a useful idiot in the audience has a weapon pointed at your face and is squeezing the trigger, whether he has a Communist Party card or not? It does not. If he is a financier or a collaborator and his efforts advance their movement to overthrow the government, it matters not if he's ideologically on board or not. He is still propelling their movement. It doesn't matter that George Bush and Nikki Haley, whether they understand that when they regurgitate communist narratives like America is systemically racist, it doesn't matter whether they know or don't know that that advances the communist movement. They are still participating in the advancement of the communist movement. And it doesn't matter, and I don't care if you like Nikki Haley or George Bush. That's the way this works. They don't care if a 4-star general or a senator or a national security advisor or a mayor or a sheriff understands that their actions undermine liberty and advance their cause. They don't care. It does, and that's what they care about. So in concluding, as I kind of finish this up, you have to understand that controlling the narrative is what this is all about. They win the war in the non-violent. The violence is used to advance the non-violence. The violence is used to defund police and undermine authority and the legal system. The violence is used, and threats of violence, to create massive shifts. And they're inside the system. You have a chairman of the Department of Defense, of the U.S. military, who calls supporters of the former president of the United States, he calls them, and I quote, brown shirts, talking about Adolf Hitler's brown shirts. He said during Mr. Biden's inauguration, we're going to ring Washington, D.C. to keep the Nazis out. That's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying that about some of you in this room if you're a patriot. And if you're a patriot, he's talking about you. This is outrageous. The last piece I'll make on this before we finish is how many of you know that James Comey was a communist? Raise your hand. James Comey. So raise them up just real quick. So maybe a dozen, maybe a few more than a dozen. Okay. Don't believe me. In a New York Magazine article in 2004, James Comey said this: I'd moved from communist to whatever I am now. I'm not even sure how to characterize myself politically. Maybe at some point I'll have to figure it out. Now, the fact that a guy like that I was a communist, can become the director of the FBI should be the massive clue to you of how broken the system is. You have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs that is clearly, if he is not a Marxist, although he publicly claims he's not, I would disagree strongly. That's where we are. And we can go through the entire administration, avowed Maoists and communists inside the system in senior leadership positions. This is the complete takeover of the federal government. The answer to the war, to lead me to this, the grand finale, is what do you do? Well, number one, you are already doing it. I will tell you, when I watched the video that you all produced on your website, the 6.5-minute video or whatever it is, that motivated me. And I would agree with what Jesse and John Bennett said. What we are experiencing at Understanding the Threat, literally right now this week, is the culmination of years of effort. And things are happening effortlessly. Things have come together that we did not organize. It is amazing to me. And it's amazing is the word I'm choosing. It's clear that people are being brought together. But let me just tell you what we do. Our organization has 5 key pillars, 5 key pieces. And the 3 that are at the core are our national operations, our state level strategies, and our ground teams, which is what I believe is most important to you all. Supporting these, we have a significant intelligence collection capability and information operations, which means basically supporting the truth by teaching, educating, and putting that out to counter the propaganda that the other side's doing. We now have significant support from people at the national level that you likely know, you do know, major patriots that are operating at a strategic level. Again, God moving. What we do through our Into Action training program, first of all, the team is a team of professionals, the best in the country, with doing the kinds of things that we do. And from a military and intelligence perspective, human intelligence, counterintelligence operations, security operations, all that stuff. But to boil it down for this crowd, it's we give you tools and build liberty teams at the ground level to actually identify these people in your local community and their organizations and to dismantle them lawfully, exercising your constitutionally protected activities. That's it. In other words, we hand you tools to take the fight to these people right in your community, right in your county. And this war, it was such a pleasure to see the maps and you talking about this in terms of counties. This war, and we were saying this back in 2005 and briefing it, this war will be won or lost at the county level. County by county, we will take back this country. And some states may be fractured, but we will take this back county by county. And what we do is we train you how to do this, how to see it at the local level, and how to engage it. So it doesn't matter. Hey, but I'm with these guys over here. what we're doing is good for no matter where you are. We're giving you the tools to know who they are, how to spot them, and how to crush them at the local level. And the only thing that limits you is your creativity. So let me just ask this. How many of you would like to take America back one county at a time? How many of you would like to join us in this fight? Stand up, please, stand up. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. We say two things, what we need. We need you to get trained and get in the fight or fund the war effort. So I'm asking if you would like, right now, our folks are passing out stuff to your table. I would encourage you to at least go to our website, sign up for a newsletter, get engaged. Get into our Into Action training program. We're going to work with Jesse like we did with Bob Lynn, and we are probably on several occasions coming back here to do trainings down in the Oklahoma City area and up here. I hope if we really just need a group of a dozen or more, between 1 and 2 dozen people to come in and train at a time, because it needs to be fairly intimate to be able to do what we do. But that's what we are going to do. So if you want to get involved, take one of these cards, fill it out, drop it back off at the table before you leave. I will be at the table, and we will be back there to answer your questions, get some resources. But let's take this country back. And with God's grace, we can do it together. Thank you, and God bless you.